On today's show, we've got a great chat with one of our favorite recurring guests from The Athletic. It's Julian McKenzie.
We get into the Four Nations face-off tournament, Brady Tkachuk, and what's the biggest Sens storyline heading out of the break.
This is Brady Tkachuk, and you're listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
You're Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome! You are locked on to the Ottawa Senators, the only daily podcast covering the Sens. On the outskirts of enemy territory, I'm Ross Levitan, alongside Brandon Piller up in the Blue Mountains. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel to get started. Today is Monday, February 17th, and Pilsy, I officially miss Senators hockey.
Yeah, it's been enough time. Although the Four Nations face-off had done a great job to scratch the itch, and a couple Sens players are highlighted in this tournament. But yeah, it's I'm almost ready for Sens hockey, Ross. I'm still excited about the way this tournament's going to shake out, though.
It's going to be awesome. We're recording this about 2 hours before Canada takes on Finland. A Game 7, as Connor McDavid called it. It's going to be awesome, but we don't want to get into it too much, obviously, because as you're listening or watching this, the game's either underway or you already know what happened. But the hockey world deserves a rematch of Saturday's Canada-USA game. Imagine being a bottom six or a bottom pair defenseman in the league, watching that and being like, how do I play in the same league with these guys? That was unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, the Canada-USA game started off with a bang, or three of them, if you're counting all the fights, and then USA shut it down to get the win there. But certainly, I think everyone, maybe apart from Swedish and Finnish fans, is hoping that Canada-USA gets a rematch here.
So we'll get into the Four Nations more with Julian McKenzie coming up. But Pilsy, we've got a little boots on the ground report from the Sensplex. One of our citizens wrote in saying that Josh Norris and Shane Pinto were both skating on the ice this morning on one sheet. So that's a good sign for two guys who fans didn't really get a timeline on from the team going into the break. Norris missed the last 3 games. Pinto missed the last, basically 3. He played 2.5 minutes of the game Tuesday in Tampa. Just how important is it getting those two back? Not down the stretch, but right away.
Yeah, I mean, Ross, even getting one of them back would be huge, let alone both of them. We know the stat when Timmy, Norris, and Pinto are together. And just the fact that this team does not have the center depth. I mean, most teams don't have the center depth to recover if your second and third line center are injured for any period, let alone long term. So if they can get one of these guys back right away up against the Montreal Canadiens, their first game, that would be great. I'm optimistic one of them is going to be back. I don't know why. I'm just going off vibes. I want one of them back, so I'm just saying it. I don't even know, Ross, which one is kind of supposed to be closer. Like we don't really know anything about their timelines. Now, Shane Pinto, obviously, it looked like that was an upper body injury, and you're hoping that it's not a shoulder injury, but it's great to see that both of them are at least skating, and with over right about a week until they're needed in Sens action again. So that's good.
And with Norris, they called it a middle body injury. So hopefully that means not a shoulder as well. I don't know where the cutoff is, though. Do you? From middle body to upper body?
Like, that's only like abdomen and hip would
so
be
like
middle.
Nipple to hip?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's sure.
Yeah, okay. So they were on one ice surface today at the Bell Sensplex. The other sheet had Ridley Gregg, David Perron, Matthew Highmore, Tyler Clevin, and Zach Ostapchuk. The players don't have to be back, I don't think, until Wednesday. So it's a good sign. The guys are fired up. They're ready to go, and they're coming back early from vacation to put in the work.
Yeah, you love to see that. But hey, also guys that are still on vacation, I mean, you might as well enjoy your time while you got this break, because there's not going to be any breaks for the Ottawa Senators after this. And hopefully, Ross, no breaks till much later on in the year than the Sens are used to taking off.
I thought you were going to take a big swing there and say June.
I was thinking about it, but I decided to keep it vague and open-ended there.
Yeah, well, they do have not a break, but it's kind of cool. They play Saturday night against the Montreal Canadiens at home. We owe them one after the way that the second game of the season happened in Montreal. And then they've got 3 days to practice before the best team in the National Hockey League, the Winnipeg Jets, come to town. So it's going to be an important, emotional first game back. And then you've got time to practice at least before you take on the Jets Wednesday, and then we'll be boots on the ground for that game Saturday against the San Jose Sharks, and it gets busy from that point on basically throughout the end of the year. But it's going to be a 2-week sprint from this Friday to the NHL trade deadline. It's coming up quick, so there's lots that needs to happen, but the Senators put themselves in a really good spot. They need 36 points in the final 26 games to all but guarantee a playoff spot. That means they basically have to win 2 for every one they lose. It's going to be exciting, and we are in the thick of a playoff race, so we're fired up about that. We're also fired up to have Julian McKenzie back on the show, Pillsy. It's been some time, but this guy brings vibes, energy, insight, and all that plus more. So looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, Julian McKenzie, writer with The Athletic, covering the Ottawa Senators. Always good to have him on the show. And yeah, it had been too long. So we got a nice long interview lined up here.
And here he is. From The Athletic, it's Julian McKenzie.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature. It keeps the game exciting throughout the entire game, whistle to whistle. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is awesome, super easy to use. And when you win, you get paid instantly. Those green numbers hitting your account real quick. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Today's episode is also brought to you by our very good friends at the Glebe Central Pub. Make sure to check out the Glebe Central Pub. They're open today on the holiday Monday, so go grab a pint and get to the GCP, where you can watch Canada take on Finland and Sweden versus the USA later tonight. They've also got their regular pub programming, the Ottawa Senators shuttle bus, which will be ever so busy the second half of the season here with 16 of the final 26 games at the Canadian Tire Center. So leave your keys at home and make sure to bring your vibes to the GCP, where they have buses for the Saturday game coming up against the Montreal Canadiens, Wednesday against the Jets on February 26th. And of course, on March 1st, we will be boots on the bus against the San Jose Sharks. The bus always leaves an hour and 15 minutes before the game and brings you right back to the pub afterwards. 2 of the next 3 buses are on Saturdays. They have live music every Saturday night. So get to the pub and have a great time. And because you're a listener of Locked On Senators, you'll get 10% off your order when you go on a Senators game day. So get your bill big enough, and that's like getting the $17 shuttle all included. So make sure to get to the Glebe Central Pub. The vibes are free at the GCP. Cannot wait to see you there. Get your tickets if you're considering coming to the March 1st game, because we are getting as many people on the bus. If we need 2 buses, we will get 2 buses, and we cannot wait to see everybody there at 779 Bank Street. So go to 779 Bank Street, walking distance from Lansdowne. The vibes are free at the GCP. All right, we now welcome a very, very special guest back to Locked On Senators from The Athletic. It is Julian McKenzie. What's up, fella? Welcome back to the show.
I'm happy to be back with you guys. It's been a couple of well, you know what? I crashed your podcast when I was out west, but of a more formal setting, it's been a couple months. Happy to be in Ottawa, happy to be a little bit more settled in, happy to be covering this team. Grateful for a lot of stuff as normal, but happy to be back on the pod with you guys. Hopefully you guys are great.
We're doing fantastic, and it's great to catch you after a week of rest. So we've got a week's worth of takes to just fire off out of you. But how was the time off? Because, I mean, we cover this team just as much as you, and it's a matter of every single night it felt like there was a game and another one and another one. How was time to just relax and recover?
It was good. I haven't had much of a break since I moved back in October. So it was actually cool to just be back with family, catch up with friends. I did a little bit of writing and it was fine to do that, but it was just cool to just not be in a situation where I had to go to games. I did have a little bit of FOMO with all the Four Nations stuff, but I know that in the next couple of months, especially if it looks like the Senators are going to make the playoffs, it sure looks favorable. The rest that I'm having right now is going to benefit me for April and beyond.
Yeah, the Sens aren't playing, but there still are some Ottawa Senators players that are playing, and some of them having big impacts. What do you think of Brady Tkachuk's appearances so far? The first game popping off with some points, and then second game following along his brother dropping the gloves just seconds into Canada USA.
Like the power forward in him, it seems like he's perfect for this tournament. It's awesome that we're watching this competition and the players give a damn. I think a lot of people were worried about that entering this tournament. And not only does Brady care about this tournament from an on-ice perspective, I still think about how he and Matthew sold the Canada-USA matchup. Like, Matthew gets interviewed by Kyle Bukauskas and says he's been waiting to play in a Canada-USA game for 9 years. And then Brady's like, this is going to be like the biggest game of my life to this point. Like, if you're the NHL and you want people to care about this tournament and you want players to sell that, like, you look at those two and you look at what they said and they're like, oh my God, like, yes. And the fact that Brady's been able to show out with his point production, the physical play, there's a reason why people look at him and say, when he makes the playoffs, like, he's going to be built for that in games that matter, because that style of play works. One other thing that I don't think enough people are talking about, and I'd like to ask him about it. I remember after that first game where obviously he plays well, he produces all those points, and I know his brother Matthew gets the first star. I'm sure you guys have noticed that Team USA has the Johnny Gaudreau jersey hanging in the locker room. And it seems like it's their thing where after games, they give it to whoever's most deserving. Brady gets that jersey after game one. Like that. Look, we can go on for forever about Johnny Gaudreau and his legacy and his unfortunate death over the last year. For Brady to be able to get that honor, like, I would imagine that has to mean something to him. I of course, in the course of hockey, you're focusing on that, but like, that was quite special, I thought, just to see him get recognized in that way. And I think just throughout this tournament, the way that he's been playing, we know about Matthew Tkachuk's stardom. There's a golden opportunity for Brady's stardom to rise in this as well. And I just hope Amazon's been able to track all of it, as we know he is going to be on the next season of their, I don't know exactly what the show's called.
I think it's called
the Face Off. Yeah, I think
NHL loves that term, eh?
Yeah, they love the face off. Facing off. Like, I think this is a golden opportunity for Brady's star to rise, not just on the ice, but off the ice as well. I think I've been pretty impressed with what I've been able to see out of him throughout these games so far at the tournament.
Yeah, and well said with the Gaudreau tribute. Brady was Gaudreau's captain the last time Gaudreau played at the World Championships last spring. So I'm sure that meant, even more to Brady to be able to carry on that legacy. And they're all playing inspired hockey. That Canada USA game, I mean, that's all time. I would be happy if we just had 7-game series of that. Like, let's ditch the fluff. Let's get right to the main event.
I'm very mixed on fighting, but I understand at the end of the day, like, people are going to get naturally hyped about fighting. And if you're a casual who doesn't care about hockey that much, the draw for you is, oh, these white boys are fighting each other. Like, that's just a thing people think about. The fact that in 9 seconds we had fight after fight after fight. I've seen line brawls to start games and mayhem, but that just felt like a completely different energy. And we didn't even loop in the politicalness of all of it with the booing of the US anthem and Justin Trudeau being there. Like this is the most politically charged. That was the most politically charged Canada USA game I have seen in my lifetime. I won't go so far as to say ever, but in my lifetime, that was the most politically charged border war I've seen on the ice played out between those two rivals. And there might not have been a better way to get some of that early tension out, at least speaking strictly with the players, than the way they went about those fights. And then to see Brady and Matthew give each other dap as they enter the box and JT Miller stepping in too, like back to that original point I'm making, like they sold this show. Like there's a showman element to how that started. And like, there was no way you couldn't be gripped to your seat after that. Like that was some really enthralling drama.
And the timing of it, where it's NBA All-Star Weekend, where they just do not try at all. Like the paradox of it was just outstanding, where you flip the channel and it's all these guys. I think it was the skills contest on Saturday night, where it's like, okay, nobody's recreating Vince Carter in 2000. Like everyone's just kind of going about their thing. You flip the channel and it is war on ice. It was amazing. The only problem, and for both teams, like imagine that game with Hughes and Makar on each side too. Like that's the only thing where it's like
the only thing we were missing.
Could have been even better.
That's the only thing we were missing. Two of the literally 1 and 2, and you can interchange them. Two of the best defensemen in the game. If you want a modern day defenseman and you get the something along the lines of Cale Makar or Quinn Hughes, you are good. Yeah. Those are the biggest things you're missing in that game. I love the fact you mentioned the NBA All-Star Weekend too, because like I saw the
Super Bowl, like no football, like perfect.
I think this tournament, I'm sure you guys have done it. I've definitely done it. We love to harp on whenever the NHL gets shit wrong, and they get a lot of stuff wrong with how they sell the game, the culture of the game, the marketing of the players, so many things wrong. This Four Nations face-off, getting back to best on best competition, I'm like a CJ has said a bunch of times, this is probably gonna be a one-off for a tournament, but best on best and getting guys to play at this point, I think they struck gold. I think the NHL found something that could work. I don't know how we're gonna go back to watching an All-Star game around this time next year or whenever else we're gonna have it. Like,
dude, how are we gonna go back to watching like a fourth line play another fourth line in the NHL?
The only thing that's our saving grace in all of this is that once the players get back to their NHL teams, it's a rapid 2-week race to the trade deadline. There's something to look forward to at least. And then after that, you're getting into all these playoff chases. But yeah, like watching playoff hockey, like I'm ready to run through a wall right now. Like it's been cool to watch this tournament. It surprised me. I was hoping it would be good considering what the players were saying, but I'm pleasantly surprised at how good it's been. And I just hope for the rest of the week with the games remaining and into the championship final, they continue that momentum. And I want playoff hockey tomorrow.
Oh, you can only just imagine what it's going to be like. My question, final question on this topic is, are you worried the Olympics could even be a bit of a letdown for this? Because I don't think we get that type of game without NHL rules. You can't have 3 fights in 9 seconds. And Brady Tkachuk's hit on Drew Doughty would have been a 5-minute charging in double IHF. The physicality was, I think, enhanced because of the NHL rules.
You're absolutely right on that point, but it's the Olympics.
Yeah,
you're playing for pride. You're playing for Olympic glory. You're playing for your country. Fine, it's going to get judged a little differently with double IHF rules, but at that point, you're still going to see the best players play. You're still going to see some incredible talent on the ice for Canada, the USA, Sweden, Finland, Czechia. I can go on all the nations who are going to be there. Like, I'm not going to be tripping too hard on
Germany.
The physical play. Well, Germany, sure.
Kimmy Stu.
Stützle, Draisaitl, the talent that they have there. That was an early complaint ahead of this Four Nations tournament. People were like, well, wait a minute. You only have these 4 countries. What about Czechia is the reigning world champion?
Yeah.
Where's that squad at? Germany has all these players coming up. What about those guys and all these other countries? You don't have a true best on best. And fine, it may not be exactly that, but at least with the countries, what we've seen out of this tournament so far, we're getting high quality hockey from everyone involved in this tournament. And look, I get it. To put a bow on your question, it'll look a little different for the Olympics, but it's the Olympics. You need the best players there. And if you're the NHL, fine, it's not in your hands there. But to sell your game, to sell your product, you need people watching the best players play for an Olympic gold medal.
And just one more thing on the Four Nations tournament, because this is the fascinating thing that I think people haven't really got to yet, is at the time of recording, we don't know how the rest of the games are going to go. So we don't know who's going to be in the final. But we do know the final won't be in Montreal. It's going to be in Boston. How much do you think the dynamic of switching, if Canada and USA play again, how much do you think the dynamic changes from being in Montreal to now being in Boston?
I mean, for the players, I don't expect it to be that drastic. Like, it's not like they're going into some territory they've never been to before. I mean, Brad Marchand gets to go home, essentially. Remember him as a Boston Bruin. I can imagine
Binnington won a Game 7 in the Stanley Cup in that building.
Right. Like, I don't expect it to be too drastic of a change. I mean, the biggest thing for Canada is if they win over Finland, will Cale Makar have played a role in that, and will he be healthy enough to play in that game too, if it gets to that point? Because hey, we could live in a world where Canada loses to Finland and then they're not there, and this is all moot. But I would think that if it got to that point, I'm not worried about the players' dynamic changing. Obviously, we'll be talking about how fans respond, considering how they responded with Canada and USA. Like, I think. This is just I wasn't there. I don't have the intel on it. I want to think that maybe there were some things done to try to mitigate some of the booing. Like, they had Michelle Kwan kind of introduce Team USA, and they kind of mentioned on the PA announcing system that, it's a tough time for the figure skating community, obviously with the unfortunate tragedy in Washington a couple weeks ago. And I thought they were trying to at least get like people to be like, hey, you know what? Like, let's ease up. People did not care. They still booed. It's and look, I'm not going to dive too much into that, but like, that clearly was a storyline entering this. In terms of dynamics changing, where it's in Boston and you have American fans who've definitely seen what took place a couple days ago, I'm very curious about how that will play itself out if we get another Canada USA game before this tournament is out. I'm very curious about that.
Hope you're enjoying our chat with Julian. We'll get right back to it. But first, Pilsy's got a word from our friends at Select Quote.
Yes, in sports, having a winning strategy is everything. It's how the best teams make the Super Bowl, the World Series, and the Four Nation Face-Offs final. The same goes for life. Having a strategy like life insurance from Select Quote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. Select Quote makes it easy to find the perfect life insurance policy. As one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, they've helped over 2 million customers find $700 billion in coverage since 1985. What sets Select Quote apart is their personal touch. Unlike other brokers that offer one-size-fits-all policies, their licensed agents tailor coverage to fit your unique needs. If you're in good health, you might even qualify for same-day coverage of up to $5 million. No medical exam required. And it's more affordable than you'd think. You can get up to $1 million in coverage for as little as $20 a month. So get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/lockedonnhl. Go to selectquote.com/lockedonnhl today to get started. That's selectquote.com/lockedonnhl. Select Quote. They shop, you save.
Yeah, I mean, the hockey gods owe us Canada USA the rematch, because Americans are rightfully on their high horse. They got the victory. They shut it down defensively after they went up 2-1. This Jacob Slavin, talking about guys who are making a star name for themselves. Everyone knew he was good, but holy smokes, that guy's unreal. And they shut down Canada's top players. McAvoy, physicality on Connor McDavid throughout. But nobody remembers that USA beat Canada in the round robin in 2010. It's all about who lifts the trophy at the end of the tournament. So I think we deserve a Canada-USA final. Now, what have you learned about Brady Tkachuk since coming to Ottawa that you maybe didn't know about him before?
That's a good question.
Thanks.
What have I learned about Brady Tkachuk that I didn't know about him? I would say that the way fans are, maybe protective isn't the right word, but I think protective, or just, I think protective is the right word in the situation. That I think is the biggest thing I've learned. And I'm obviously referencing the trade speculation that comes around him. Like, even after, I don't know if you guys saw, someone did a graphic or some AI thing where they put Brady Tkachuk in a Chicago jersey.
Oh,
And
I
they're
saw
like, yeah, I want him on
Rangers.
my team.
It's 31 teams doing mock trades yesterday, and they're all trash.
Like,
Hot take, I wouldn't
Yeah.
trade Brady Tkachuk for Connor Bedard. I wouldn't do it.
wow. Wow.
What Brady means to the Ottawa Senators as an organization, I don't think you could put a value on that.
Okay. Like, I'll give you this. Like, Brady Tkachuk and the style that he plays and what he means to the Senators. And if they make the playoffs, the playoffs are going to be set for him to play that style. And if he plays anything less than that, it's going to be a disappointment. The expectation is that he's going to do what he's been doing at this Four Nations tournament. And we talk about how teams need guys like that to get you through the playoffs. So if you're the Ottawa Senators, why are you moving on from that guy, right? So I think seeing how people reacted to any discussion of his name being thrown out there in possible trades. We remember the New York Rangers story around them and Michael Landauer saying, hey, like, maybe there's some soft tampering going along. I have to say that's like the biggest thing I've learned about him and his persona and all that, and also how he's handled that too. Like, when I had to write about him after the children's hospital visit, and he's like, you know what, like, it's not in my control. I'm just pushing that out there. Like, maybe he's just saying that, but I'm inclined to believe that at this point, like, he's probably heard enough of this where that has to be his reaction. And I remember, like, in talking to you guys at the beginning of the year, like, that his future was very much a storyline for me. And if this was a different year, if this team was out of it in November, we'd be talking a lot more about his NMC kicking in July, right? And what the team should be doing with him. Now we're in a timeline where there's no way the Sens should be even entertaining the idea of moving on from him. So a roundabout way of saying that I learned a lot about how protective fans are over him. And I guess I'll just add that, like, just his play style and his net front presence, like, you hear about it, but like getting to focus on it a little bit more and having that more in view, like, it's firmly implanted in my brain how important he is for the success of the Ottawa Senators. He doesn't have to be on Stützle's level where he's a bona fide superstar in the making, or maybe he's knocking on that door, I think. But, like, you just need him to be one of the best players on your team.
Now, as a writer covering this team, Julian, check out Julian's work at The Athletic. We always love following along.
Checks in the mail.
Nice. Well, I'll give you a little bit of a choose your own adventure here. Coming out of the Four Nations tournament, what to you is the biggest storyline? Is it the Pinto Norris injuries? Is it the goaltending? What the Senators are going to do at trade deadline? Or is it not one of those three? Something else you got in mind?
My answer to that question is yes. No, I'm kidding. I think the injury and the trade deadline stuff is connected in some ways. I think if Pinto and Norris are not healthy enough to go immediately after the break is over and they get back to it on Saturday, I think it puts more pressure on Steve Staios to do something. I was in the camp that said this team needed another defenseman early through much of this year. I think now maybe they don't need to do it as much because Nicholas Matenpalo has emerged from out of nowhere as a good depth defenseman to have. And he should be playing as a number 6 every day. You know, no shade to Travis Hamonic, no shade to Jacob Bernard-Docker, who's been hurt. But Matenpalo, to me, has been the most impressive person in that spot. All that to say, like, you don't need to put as much pressure if you're a fan on Steve Staios to make a move there. But when your team has the 20th or the 21st ranked offense in the league, and for a good chunk of time since like mid-November to now, you're near the bottom in goals scored. And yeah, you can say that, like, and I know this because I asked Steve myself, could say that, like, you have the options internally in Tim, in Drake Batherson, in Brady Tkachuk, who are supposed to play well. But if you have an opportunity to add, and I still think they'll buy low, but if you have an opportunity to add to that core, I think you do it. If it's just that storyline, if it's just at a point where the players are healthy and you just need to plug in some other piece, where is this team going to buy low so they can enhance that? If you're in a situation where Pinto and Norris need more time, like, I don't know how you don't put pressure on yourself to make something happen, even if it might be a bit of a tricky situation with your salary cap and whatever assets you have available. Like, I still think this team, by deadline, they need to make some kind of addition up front. And if they don't do it, and if goal scoring lets them down, what's the first thing we're all going to say? Why didn't they do anything to improve that part of the ice?
And I think you're right on to something, and that was a great question, Pilsy, because I think what you're kind of seeing, at least in my mind, is that goaltending and trade deadline prep are intertwined. You saw what Levi Marilainen can do at the NHL level. You mentioned the cap, $2.75 million in Anton Forsberg. That to me is the biggest question. He's been playing better over the course of the last month, but would you rather not put that towards a forward? Put that towards guys who can help you get more depth up front? You know that you got a stud down in the minors, and he's been playing lights out since going back down as well. Got a shutout in Ottawa last Wednesday against the best team in the American Hockey League. So to me, those two are almost intertwined. But Julian, we work fast on this show. The poll's already up on Twitter at Sens Central. People can go vote there. What is the biggest storyline coming out of the Four Nations? And 82% of the first 50 votes, so still lots of time to get your votes in, but 82% are saying the Norris Pinto injuries because of how critical the depth down the middle is. And we've got the banner. We always have the banner ready, Julian. The Sens record with Stützle, Norris, and Pinto, they're a third or second place team in the division when they have that depth down the middle. So I'm hoping that that's something that works itself out. But to have more depth, maybe a guy that plays wing but can also play center, so you're not forcing Ridley Gregg into a second-line center position if there's an injury. That could be. But if there's one thing at the deadline that you'd be looking for, you mentioned maybe you don't need a defenseman as much. Who would you be trying to target with not giving up the farm to get it?
Like, I still think getting Ryan Donato makes sense. I remember I was talking about it with CJ, and CJ was saying, like, hey, like, Ryan Donato, no shade to him, but, like, he's a bit of a smaller guy. But I do like the fact that he's able to play basically all positions. He's tracked really well offensively. His underlying metrics have looked pretty good too. And I just think you just need some kind of scorer, someone who could provide a little bit offensively. You don't need it. Donato, you can plug him in a third line role. You can plug him as a center if you need him to. I don't hate that move as a possibility. The only question I have now is, what is the asking price going to be? Because once upon a time, it looked like maybe you could just get away with flipping a third round pick to get him. That price is going to go up. Like, when I did my trade proposal piece the other day, I talked with Scott Powers, who covers Chicago for us at The Athletic, and he mentioned the fact that, like, that asking price is going to go up. And the closer you get to the deadline and the more interest drums up for him, you're thinking about, are the Senators prepared to move a second round pick for Ryan Donato and make that work? Is that enough? Maybe that is, but, like, I think just in terms of moves like that, where you're not looking to move on from your prospect pool, any of your first round picks, you're trying to buy a little bit low here. I see them targeting players like Ryan Donato. One guy I kind of got sold on through the exercise I did. I don't know how you guys feel about it. I think Gustav Nyquist in Nashville makes a little bit of sense because he has defensive capabilities. He can kill penalties. He's having a bit of a down year compared to what he had last year with the Predators. And I think you're gonna, if you're the Senators and you're making a move, you want him to retain a little bit of that salary left on the books. But that's another that's not young. Sorry, he's like older. That's another player you can add who can provide a little bit of that scoring depth for your team. That being said, though, I think you're probably going to want a little bit more size. If Columbus, I'm not sure exactly where they are in the standings right now, but a guy who might be able to provide a little bit more size, a guy like Mathieu Olivier, who's not afraid to be a ish disturber when it comes time for it. That's someone you could probably think about as well. Yeah, I see the Senators adding a middle of the lineup forward who has a bit of a scoring punch. And if they have size and they have an ability to get a little physical, I think that's essentially a bonus. But Ross, you're also right. Like the Norris Pinto conversation of the center depth, that's everything for this team. We saw what happened with the last few games before they went into break. Look, Linus Ullmark, I don't think he was that bad, but I think he would have fared a lot better if at least one of those two centers were back in the lineup. If they are without those two for an even longer extended period of time, I still think it influences what they have to think about for the trade deadline. And you start to get very worried about the Senators' playoff chances, depending on how long those guys are gone.
Final question for me here, Julian. This has been awesome. I always love having you on the show.
Thanks,
we
man.
kind of talked about before this break happened that this kind of is a good time for this break for the Ottawa Senators. They come off a terrible trip to Florida where they lose 2 huge games up against the Lightning, and then to cap it off, get absolutely beat down by the Florida Panthers. You hope that you get some rest and recovery for guys like Norris, Pinto, and even just the other Sens players that aren't playing in this tournament. Go get some sunshine, go on vacation, relax, then come back. How do you think this team's going to come back out of this break? Like, they've got a couple home games, first game up against Montreal at home. Like, do you think that this break is really going to kind of fire them up to get them going? Or is it going to take a little while to get back into the swing of things for this team?
I mean, I think for extended breaks like that, there always has to be a little bit of grace period, but also considering what this playoff race has been like you can't rest for too long. Like, you need to get back into it. You need to find yourself back into the thick of things. And I think depending on what the health of Norris and Pinto will be like, them coming back, the sooner both of those guys are available, the sooner the Senators, I think, get re-energized with those guys being available to them. We know about how important they are for their center depth, and with all these other teams chasing them. Think about it. Your first game back against the Montreal Canadiens, they're falling a little bit in the standings, but they're still playing for some kind of pride. They're still trying to claw themselves back. It's not going to get any easier in terms of the opponents you face, but at least your schedule isn't going to look anything like what it was in January, where you had back-to-backs every weekend. Still insane that they were able to play through that, but the fact that they survived that, massive for their playoff chances. So it's always tough to tell with how these things play out. You never know what could really happen, but I think in order for them to have a successful return from break, those two players we mentioned earlier, they need to be back as soon as possible.
Well said, Julian. Final question from me. Appreciate you always, and we can't wait a couple more months to get you back on. We got to make this a more regular thing. Now you're a recurring guest, so you're not allowed to say no when we ask you to come on the show. Your latest on The Athletic is discussing how the Senators became one of the best defensive teams in the National Hockey League. Everyone can go read the details, the stats, but was that a surprise to you coming into the year?
A little bit, considering the fact that this team has struggled at that end of the ice, considering how they struggled, especially with goaltending. The thing for me in making that piece that stands out to be the most is the fact that this is all about the team coming together with a new head coach who's trying to make them play a little bit more responsibly defensively, and guys like Thomas Chabot and Brady Tkachuk and everyone else in that locker room just looking at each other and saying, dude, we need to play this style to win. Like if you've read the piece, like, I don't think there's anything absolutely revolutionary in their defensive coverages. Like, teams are playing this layered defensive style where they're marking parts of the ice and they're not playing man. This is something that teams have been picking up on since Vegas saw success with it. It's a copycat league, and Shane Pinto directly says that in relation to their penalty kill, but still it applies to so many other things. But I think the fact that the players in that room, the key players in that room, have been so fed up of missing the playoffs and not being good enough and having Novembers ultimately decide their season, the fact that they all collectively bought in and made this system work for them, and right now they're 10th in defense. I think that's the interesting thing for me here. The fact that they all know that pressure is hanging above them with the lack of playoff success, not even making the playoffs at all. And if they don't make it this year, who knows what the discussion is going to be like. There has to be changes with that roster if it doesn't get to that point. But the fact that they've made it work for them at that end of the ice, and goaltending has played a huge part in them succeeding too. But think of the game a couple weeks ago against the Minnesota Wild, one of the best road teams in the league. Another team that knows a thing or two about playing solidly defensively. The Sens shut them down completely. Their offense woke up in that game, but defensively, the Wild weren't able to get much out of that. Those are massive strides from what they've looked like in years past.
And we're hoping that continues, man. Looking forward to your coverage throughout the rest of the season. Julian McKenzie from The Athletic, great guy. I was going to say better writer, but that's tough, man, because you're a solid individual. We look forward to seeing you in Ottawa down the road, and thanks for doing this as always.
Thanks so much for having me, guys, and I'll be back on soon.
All right, Pilsy, we've got breaking news to wrap up the show. Jake Sanderson will play tonight for Team USA. He will take Charlie McAvoy's spot. Of course, Team USA has wrapped up a spot in the championship game. Looking forward to seeing Sandy in action tonight.
Yeah, it's nice that he's going to get an opportunity. I mean, sure, he was the late guy brought in, but if you're brought in, you want to play, and Sanderson's going to get that opportunity.
And we're looking forward to that, and we're hopefully looking forward to a big Canada win today over Finland to set up a rematch between Canada and the U.S. We got lots more to come this week on Locked On Senators. We've got a couple interviews lined up with some Sens prospects. We'll get into a fan discussion and a whole lot more. So stick with us. Make sure to like and subscribe everywhere you get podcasts. We're free and available on YouTube. Leave a 5-star review. It's been nice. We had a first weekend off basically since Christmas. Of course, we did an interview yesterday. We can't help ourselves, but we are geared up and ready to go for the second half. So stick with us on this ride. It's going to be a fun one, and cannot wait to get Senators hockey back next Saturday against the Montreal Canadiens. For today, we say goodbye. For Brandon Piller, I'm Ross Levitan. This has been another edition of the Locked On Senators podcast, your team every day.